Welcome to Capital Tiger Bay, first meeting of 2019. Glad to see all of you here today. I'm Gil Ziffer. I am president this year of Capital Tiger Bay, and it's an honor to be here in front of all of you, and also to have our guest speaker, formerly with the Tallahassee Democrat, columnist and journalist Mark Hinson. He'll be introduced shortly by Bill Cotterell. Something new now. We're going to go around the room. We'll start over here and announce yourself. Is anybody expecting to be indicted? Okay. Who raised their hand over there? Who did that? Okay, we'll move on now. In local news, actually in news period, where does one start, right? There's been so much. I'm going to curtail my comments to just a few things. Locally, former Mayor Andrew Gillum has remained active in the news. It was announced he is a Harvard Fellow, and just announced yesterday he will be a commentator on CNN. Good for the mayor, congratulations. Jamie Van Pelt, maybe a name many of you don't know. He was Mayor Gillum's most recent chief of staff, and it was announced that he is now president of ESP Media, which is Sean Pittman's media company. Congratulations to Jamie. About to be announced, not many people know this, Jamie Van Pelt's predecessor as chief of staff for Mayor Gillum and mayoral candidate Dustin Daniels is seeking a similar commentator's position with Nickelodeon, or perhaps more appropriately, the History Channel. Ooh. That was good, I like that. You like that? Governor DeSantis' selection for Secretary of State, Michael Ertl, had to resign due to an extremely embarrassing photo that was taken from 15 plus years ago. Only in office a few weeks, the governor, this is his administration's first black eye. Oh, come on. Nationally, not sure if many of you saw this, but Nancy Pelosi is in the news again, clearly. She wants to kiss and make up with the president. Evidently, she already has picked out and sent to the White House her Valentine's gift, a case of KY for the president. Love you, Donald, it says here. That's something like that. So, the Capitol promotion, Bill Cotterell. Bill?
It's nice to be invited. I haven't seen Mark since he left the paper, and he is truly an old friend, and it's also good to be with so many old friends here. We have, as you've noticed, an all Tallahassee Democrat head table over here. We wanted to get an all Mariana head table in honor of Mark, but the Democrat, or the Civic Center has this shirts and shoes requirement. And, we actually sent an envoy to make sure that, and we could tell from a cold day, that Mark would observe the rule. And I do have one rule in making introductions, is that nobody ever came to a speech to hear the introduction. So I make them brief, and with that, I'll hand it to my friend Mark. Oh, you wrote it down.
I did that.
Thank you, Phil. That was a joke. I've known Phil for years. He and I have been cohorts together, haven't we? He read my stuff and didn't understand a word of it. I know a lot of you, and for that I am sorry. Instead of reading about my column, which was mainly about Mariana, my Navy SEAL father, alligators, and all that kind of stuff, I decided to talk about some of my favorite interviews that I've done over the years, now that I am retired. That's a word that Gannett came up with. Gannett is the company that owns the Democrat. When I say own, I mean owns, right? So if you have any complaints, send them to Gannett, and not to the Democrat. Just keep in mind that corporate journalism is corporate journalism. When I started out, I was a young man, and Andy Williams came to the Civic Center. Now, most of you remember Andy Williams, so I will tell you a little bit about Andy. He always had on the Theo sweater. He had a image that was squeaky clean. When he retired, he owned a theater in Branson, so that tells you a little bit about Andy Williams. He sang Moon River, which was written by, he was the Moon River, he was a crooner. I was into the Replacements and the Sex Pistols, and the last person I wanted to interview when I was told, guess who you're interviewing, is Andrew Williams. So Andy Williams and I immediately were at odds. I didn't like him, and I'm sure if he knew me, he wouldn't like me. So like I said, I was young, I was in my 20s. So I called, and I did, like all good journalism, do your research, always be over-prepared. As my mother always said, always be overdressed rather than underdressed. And she's right. So know your stuff, and then that way you can take them down. I hated the Osmond brothers. Now, if you recall Donny Osmond, they were from Salt Lake City. They started out as the Osmond brothers. They started out on the Andy Williams show. So I blame him personally. And I held a deep grudge against Andy Williams for Donny Osmond in particular, and the Osmond brothers, you know, as they come and go. And so I call up Andy Williams. This is done over the phone. And I call up Andy, and he had just gotten off his treadmill, and I'm like, oh God, what have I got to say to this guy? So I start off to be my 25-year-old self, being a smart, you know what. And I said, so, the Osmonds said, they started on your show. Said, don't you feel bad about unleashing the Osmond brothers on the American public? To which Andy Williams said, yeah, were they shit? And from that time on, that's one of the best interviews I have ever done. Who knew that Andy Williams, Mr. Sweater, Mr. A, wish yourself a Merry Little Christmas, who knew he was one cool dude? He said, the Osmond says, who knew barbershop quartets were going to be popular with the American public? I didn't. Said, I put them on my show as a favor to my agent. Said, I owed him a favor. I figured they would be gone in a week. Who knew? Who knew that they would turn into Osmonds? So after that, we talked about Jonathan Winters. If you remember the comedian, Jonathan Winters. Robin Williams loved Jonathan Winters. And Andy Williams said he had personal love of Jonathan Winters. So he brought Jonathan Winters, even though he knew Jonathan Winters, who had been through World War II. I think he was in the Battle of the Bulge too. And so he brought Jonathan Winters, knowing he was insane. He was crazy, as they say in Mariana, crazy as a cut snake. And Jonathan Winters would come on, and he would let Jonathan do whatever he wanted to do because he's Jonathan Winters. And he said, yeah, I knew he's crazy. He said the day I walked out of Rockefeller Plaza, said Jonathan Winters was addressing the hedges and as if they were soldiers. And he was telling each one of them his piece of mind. He said, so I just laid him and said, Jonathan, you want to share a cat? So I kept going. We talked about Andy Williams. We talked about his former wife, Claudine Longet. Oh, got groans. That's good. That's good. I love groans. Claudine Longet, if you don't know, she was a French chanteuse. She was a singer. Mainly, she had boobs, and she was very good looking. And I still wish I had this album. It had Claudine Longet, and she was holding her hands up very angelically. And somebody had drawn a 45 in her hands. That's because she shot and murdered her husband, after the guy that she left Andy for, Spider Savage, was a skier. And so I said, Andy, I said, what did you think when she left you for Spider? And he said, I didn't really care. He said, I would have left you for Spider too. He said, Annie, coolest guy on the planet, by the way, said, yes, during her murder trial, I acted in her defense. I mean, you did what? And he acted in his ex-wife's, who murdered her lover, acted as her defense, and she got off because of Andy Williams. Now, how many of you would defend your ex-wife? My wife is here, so sorry, I love you very much. But I learned from that day on, at 25, because before that I had done Talking Heads, and I had done Who's the Leftist? He walked in the room and he said, so this is the left in Tallahassee? I said, this is the what's left. What was his name? Anyway, I had worked for the Flambeau. So I learned never to ever sit on your hands. And every interview is different. Every interview, people ask me all the time, what do you do for interviews? It's just know your stuff and then just see which way it goes. The worst interview, I will leave her name out, but you probably know her as a country singer, and her name rhymes with Eva. And so here's Reba McEntire. Oh God, let out. I didn't mean to do that. So here she is, former rodeo star, came up Oklahoma. She's got stories. You know, she's a woman in country music. She's got stories. You know, she had a hit comedy series. She's got stories. So I get Reba McEntire on the phone, and here I have been to a Reba concert. I've been the only male at the Reba concert, which has a different story. But anyway, Reba McEntire, here's her answers. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, okay. It was odd. Yeah. You can't quote that. I'm sorry. It's like, you can't make up a story. And then she said, yeah. And it just doesn't happen that way. So you never know who's going to be a dead fish and who's going to be a live fish. And I'm in entertainment. You're putting on a concert in Tallahassee. I'm here to help you sell tickets. Let's cut the bull, out of the way. And you have to play along. The one guy who was willing to play along, and I had been a lifelong fan, is the shock rocker Alice Cooper. And I had been a fan of Alice Cooper since I was in 7th grade. And I figured out the reason I loved Alice Cooper so much is because it drove my parents crazy. And my brothers hated his music. And so I turned it up loud and just absolutely loved Alice Cooper. So, yes, I would be happy to interview Alice Cooper. 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 25 minutes. An hour later, I hang up the phone and go, God, that was Alice Cooper. I was supposed to have 15 minutes. But anyway, here's Alice Cooper. I had, thank God for YouTube. I wish they'd had it when I was little. I never would have left the house. He met Elvis. Alice Cooper met Elvis when he was when Alice Cooper was just starting out. So this would have been 70, 71. This is right when Elvis had gone to Las Vegas. So Elvis was the king of Las Vegas, thank you very much. And so he calls up, his Memphis Mafia calls up Alice Cooper and says, the king of rock and roll would like to meet you. Would you like to meet the king? And Alice Cooper, of course, now this is over the phone, Alice Cooper's telling me all this, says, I said, hell yes. So he gets to Elvis is in Las Vegas. He has the whole upper suite to the Las Vegas, Elvis suite. He says, I get to the elevator. Said the other people that are on the elevator with me are Chubby Checkers, remember him from the Twists, Chubby Checkers, he played here for New Year's Eve, and Linda Lovelace. She was our first chorus star, ladies and gentlemen, Linda Lovelace. She starred in a little movie called New Crush. So it's Alice Cooper, it's Chubby Checkers, Linda Lovelace. It's 1970 or 71, Las Vegas. They're going up to meet the king. So right when they get off the elevator goes straight to Elvis's place. It's a suite. And so here's Elvis. And Memphis Mafia says, take all your guns out. So if you have any guns on you, take them out. And so everybody's like, okay, all right. So they unarm themselves. And so it says, would you like to meet the king? And I said, yes, I would. I would love to meet the king. And so Elvis walks up and says, which I listen to Alice Cooper and says, You're like a little snake boy, aren't you? At the time, Alice Cooper had a boa constrictor. He still does have a boa constrictor that he was on stage. He says, I like what you do. Says, hey, do you know your weapons? Said, you know how to take 38 from somebody? He said, no, I don't. Said, follow me to the kitchen. So Elvis opens up the drawer. It's Alice Cooper and Elvis Presley standing there. And he goes, shoo. Said, pick up that 38. He said, is it loaded? And Elvis goes, hell yeah, it's loaded. So Alice Cooper picks up a loaded 38 snub-nosed revolver. Elvis goes, point it at me. He says, and Alice Cooper told me this. He said, and then I thought the most Alice thing that you could possibly think. Shoot the king of rock and roll. He said, you don't have to kill him. He said, just shoot him. He said, just shoot him in the leg, or shoot him in the arm. But how many people could say, I shot the king of rock and roll? And so Alice Cooper is standing there with a loaded 38 in his hand, pointed at Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll in Las Vegas, 1971. And so he's standing there like, and I was, what anybody in this room would do. And then Elvis goes, and puts Alice Cooper on the ground and puts his foot in his throat and takes the gun away and says, I'll take your gun away from you, man. And I said, now that's a story. And he said, yes. Said, how many people get thrown on the kitchen floor? Said, nobody batted an eye. And so he took the 38 away from me. And he said, well, thank you very much. And said, now you gotta go. And so Alice Cooper gets on the elevator, and he says, and he rides down the elevator, and he goes, it was just me and Chubby Checker on the elevator. I don't know what Elvis did with Linda for the rest of the night. And I went, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. So another childhood favorite of mine was Joe Cocker. I went to see Joe Cocker, the Woodstock movie, when I was a kid. God, I was a little kid. And I saw it in Atlanta with my brother Richard. And I'd never seen Joe Cocker before, and I was mesmerized by Joe Cocker. I walked out of Woodstock with Sly and the Family Stone and Joe Cocker. And Santana, even though he was on, don't tell anybody, but supposedly Santana was on so much acid that his guitar was a snake. And so next time you watch the Woodstock movie, keep that in mind. But anyway, I had seen Joe Cocker. And if you don't know Joe Cocker, John Belushi used to do a great imitation of Joe Cocker until he did Joe Cocker to Joe Cocker. And John Belushi said, I'll never do that again. I'll never ever do that again. So God rest your soul, John Belushi. So Joe Cocker was coming to the moon. Now I had seen Joe Cocker in 1979 when he staged his comeback. And he is sort of a comeback. His band was more interesting than the singer because they kept lighting the horns on fire. And I was more fascinated with him than the drummer. That was Joe Cocker. And Joe Cocker was, and sorry, didn't mean to deafen you. So here's Joe Cocker. Now he has cleaned up his act. He is coming to the moon. This is in the 2000s. This is a different Joe Cocker than the one that I saw in Dothan, Alabama. I could not get Joe Cocker on the phone. I tried all I wanted to get Joe Cocker. I said, I gotta get Joe Cocker on the phone. No, Joe's busy, he's, blah, blah, blah. So I still wrote a glowing story about Joe Cocker. Just starting out with a story about lighting the horns on fire. And so as a consolation prize, Scott Carswell, who owns the moon, and I'm standing there and he says, hey, you wanna go pick up Joe Cocker? And I said, yeah, I do. Forrest Watson was with me. Forrest is seated right there. This is a true story. So Forrest and I get in Carswell's Blazer or whatever it is, SUV, and go down to the hotel, it's in downtown Tallahassee, to pick up Joe Cocker. Joe Cocker comes out. He looks like a truck driver. I wouldn't know him if Joe Cocker was sitting here. I wouldn't know him from Adam's House Cat. So he gets in the back seat. He's behind me. Forrest goes up and gets him. I wait outside. I'm driving. Joe Cocker starts to talk. I don't understand a blooper thing he said, and he was speaking English. But he's from the Midlands of England. He's from Sheffield, England. And he was this, and he was. Now I've understood everything this man has said for years. He's the first rock star that I had on my wall was a picture of Joe Cocker doing this, and I couldn't understand anything he said. And it's like, no wonder this guy doesn't do phone interviews, because he doesn't speak English. Yeah, he sounds like Ray Charles when he sings, but he doesn't speak English. So we finally get to the moon before the show, and I look at him, and when you look at him, you can start to tell what he's trying to say. You know, he's talking about this, he's all the left, and so as it turns out, and here he is, he's a little pot-bellied guy, and I said, Mr. Cocker, I just want to say, and I'm usually not like this, he said, I used to want to say, you're the first rock star I ever put on wall. And he hugged me. And that is, again, it's one of the highlights of my career, is Joe Cocker. After the show, he killed, he murdered, he got on stage, he was so good. And my nephew had a girlfriend who was half Sicilian and half Taiwanese. She got the best of both worlds. And she was good looking. And we walked out of the show, and I was on cloud nine. And she said, Mark, this is the first rock and roll show I've ever been to. She's an Air Force brat, and she's so good looking that her father kept her under lock and key, which I don't blame. I would do the same. And so I said, and I wanted to tell her that all shows are different, that everything is different. You never know what you're going to get. Some suck, some are great, some are you know, they're okay. So I just said, yes, they're all like this. So she's under the idea that Joe Cocker is the best. I've interviewed a lot of people. George Clinton, who lives here, the Godfather of Funk, is one of the most forthcoming interviews that I've ever done. He will ask you about, you can ask him anything, and he will tell you his drug consumption, for example. He quit doing cocaine because his dealer cut it with so much salt that he got diabetes. And to which I said to George Clinton, I said, you're suing your lawyers for all the song rights. I said, should you sue your drug dealers too? So George Clinton is a wonderful guy. Mavis Staples, I would, no offense, Amy, I would marry Mavis Staples. She is, yeah, I don't care. She's 78 years old, I don't care. She said she was the only person, she used to open shows when she was a member of the Staples Singers with Pop Staples. She used to open shows for Martin Luther King, Jr. That's how great she is. And she put on one of the best shows that I've ever seen at Bethel AME's church. It's, again, she's just, and I knew all about her. And I asked her, I said, MLK, I said, everybody, he had a very serious job. I said, every story I've heard about him has been serious. I said, what do you remember most about MLK? And Mavis said, his laugh. And said, he would tell, before he would go on stage, he would tell the most profane jokes. And he and Pop Staples would laugh and laugh and laugh. And I have never heard anybody say that about Martin Luther King. So, but if Mavis Staples wants to say it, it must be true. She gave me one of the best quotes. She said, I said, how do you feel about the differentiation between the church and secular music? And she said, baby, it's all God's music. And that's when I went, well, I couldn't have said it better. You know, so I use that quote. I've seen that quoted many times, but it comes from Mavis Staples. The one time, I will tell you this, I will name drop, I was with Salman Rushdie. He's the novelist who was boycotted by the Ayatollah for making fun of the Prophet, Muhammad, back before it was popular to do that. But anyway, I was Salman Rushdie. He was working in Atlanta. He drove down. Can you imagine being on I-75 and running into Salman Rushdie while he's pumping gas? Yeah. So Salman Rushdie, once again, another guy that's usually taken very seriously, is very funny. Is a very funny guy. If you meet him, he disarms you. He's smart. He's funny. And so he was having his portrait taken at Ruby Diamond. Weirdly, this is being in the right place at the right time, being zealot that I am. Says, Mark, we don't have anybody to run Mr. Rushdie over. Said, would you mind being Mr. Rushdie's escort? I said, yeah. Yeah, I kind of know who Salman Rushdie is. So I'm standing there, and Amy, my wife, calls me from, at the time she was a rep on the road, a sales rep. And she calls me and says, where are you? And this is the only time you can say this. Oh, I'm backstage with Salman Rushdie. And it was true. So she got me back with years, or before that, with Joseph Heller, who hit on her, and I don't blame him. Stephen King, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Stephen King, I met him in person. He's very tall. He's better looking than he is. He is we had tried to do an interview on the phone. It fell through. He drove up again. Can you imagine being at the gas station and running into Stephen King and oh hi, so we went downtown. It was a sunny afternoon. We went to one of the downtown hotels. Nobody was in it. I knew the manager of the motel. He said, I'll give you the suite. I said, no, we'll sit in the bar. I said, no, I'll give you the upstairs suite. We go in this upstairs suite. It's me and Stephen King. He's about this tall. And he's looking at it and says, let's go in here. And we walk in this room and there's nothing but chairs. Stacked chairs in one room. And so we pull up 2 chairs and talk. So I'm like, this is creepy to begin with, and I'm with Stephen King. This is very creepy. He is a charming SOD. He is one, he can talk about anything under 2 minutes. He told me the funniest story. Once again, this is a story. He was in Publix. He has his house in Sarasota. He drove up from Sarasota. He has a house in Bangor, Maine, too. And so he was in Publix. He shops at Publix, where shopping is a pleasure. And he is buying lettuce. And this short little woman comes up to him, walks up to Stephen King. Here's Stephen King, one of the best-selling authors of all time, horror movie aficionado. Wrote a lot of movies that you've seen, Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption. And this little woman walks up to him and says, I know who you are and what you write, and I don't like it. To which Stephen King, being Stephen King, says, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. Said, what kind of things do you like? And she said, I like that movie, The Shawshank Redemption. To which Stephen King says, I wrote that. And she said, no, you didn't. And starts to walk away and says, no, ma'am, I wrote The Shawshank Redemption. She turns to us and says, no, you did not. And she's walking away, and he yells in this loud voice. He says, I wrote The Shawshank Redemption. To which the whole grocery store turns around and he goes, ooh, that's Stephen King, what an ego in hell, man. What a jackass he is. So these are the kind of stories you live for. On the way out of Hotel Duval is where we were. And so they have a very ornate carpet, and it looks just like the hotel in The Shining. Stephen King wrote The Shining. And of course, Stanley Kubrick made the movie and the big wheel scene, And so I'm standing there, and we're on the top floor. Now it's a bar. And so we press the elevator. It takes a little while. Thank God for the Lovelace, it's not much. And so I'm standing there with Stephen King, nobody around. And I said, Stephen, I said, just so you know, if a kid on the big wheel comes around the corner, I said, I'm running right over your ass. And he said, I was thinking the same thing about you. I will tell one story. My favorite interview of all time, while I'm strolling down memory lane, is with Mel Tillis. Now, I am not making fun of stutter. That is what Mel was famous for. And Mel was a famous stutterer. He's a famous country singer. He wrote, to me, what is the perfect country song, which is Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town, which is a great song, which he wrote about a Korean War vet when he grew up in Tampa. So the crazy Asian War, it's not, everybody thinks it's about Vietnam, it's about Korea. So anyway, Mel Tillis, I go downtown. He's being inducted to the Florida Artists Hall of Fame, because he is a Florida boy. He was born in Tampa. He grew up around Pahokee, is where he's from. So he grew up around in the Tampa area. So anyway, his kindergarten teacher came to his induction ceremony. How cool is that? So here's Mel Tillis, again, another tall guy. So I never met Mel Tillis before. And here is Mel. So I wondered about this. This is, again, do your homework. Webb Pierce, I don't know if you know that name. You probably don't, and if you do, good for you. Webb Pierce sold more records than Hank Williams Sr. in the 50s. He was the #1 country star in the 1950s, Webb Pierce. Webb Pierce was a huge dude. He wore nudie suits. He's a big guy. Here's Webb Pierce. Mel got started writing songs for Webb Pierce. Now, I did a little cross-checking, and I noticed that Homer and Jethro, that, you know, a ventriloquist of Bocephus was inducted to the Hall of Fame before Webb Pierce was. Webb Pierce died in the early 90s, I think it was. He didn't get inducted till the 2000s. So it took a long, usually the Country Artist Hall of Fame, they will induct anybody. I'm surprised, I'm not. Yeah, and so I went, that is very strange that they waited this while for Webb Pierce, you know, who made all this money from Nashville, to induct him into the Hall of Fame. So I said, I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask about Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town. I said, but the first question is going to be about Webb Pierce. So here's Mel Tillis, he's dressed up, goes through the follow-all, you know, and I cut my way to the front, as only journalists do. And here's Mel Tillis, and I said, Mr. Tillis, I have 2 questions, just 2. The second one is about Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town. But the first one is about Webb Pierce. Why did it take so long for Webb Pierce to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame? And here's Mel Tillis, and the governor's standing there, everybody's standing there, said, Webb Pierce was an asshole. You don't get answers like that very often. I about dropped my pad. I was like, 1, his honesty was like too much. 2, that's funny. 3, what was wrong with Webb? So I had to follow it up. I said, why? Why did everybody dislike Webb? He said, well, Webb liked to drink. Said, and he was a mean drunk. He said, he drank a lot. So Webb Pierce is a jerk. So I find that out. We talk about Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town. These Webb's Mel Tillis. It's hard to say Mel Tillis without stuttering. He was very proud of that song, as he should be. And he said that when he and Johnny Paycheck were pitching songs to get started, when he was still a starving songwriter, he got started, he went to Nashville. He said, and we met with all the radio disc jockeys. This would be in the early 60s. And back then, people listened to the radio, disc jockeys were God. And so they gave them as much free booze as they wanted. So he spent about 3 days boozing it up with all the disc jockeys. And he said, finally, I had had enough. Said, Johnny, he said, we decided to rent a cheap room and stay. I forget the other, there's a third. So Johnny wasn't done yet. And so unbeknownst to Webb, Mel Tillis, Johnny goes out for the night with the DJs and drinks his fill. Well, Mr. Paycheck forgot his keys to the room. And so here's Mel Tillis lying in bed. Webb Pierce, who's stalkered, decides, well, I don't have the key to the room. I'll just break into the room. So he's breaking into the window. Mel Tillis is lying here, and Johnny Paycheck is coming in this way. And Mel Tillis said, I woke up. Said, I didn't know it was Johnny. He said, I tried to tell the other guys that we were being robbed. And I stuttered. He said, well, I don't stutter when I sing. So I sang, there's a robber coming into the window. Oh boy, don't you know there's a robber coming into the window. That's, again, that's like, all right, I'm done. You got me good, Mel. My mouth is open. I see why Mel Tillis was on Johnny Carson all the time, and you see why, because he told great stories. He finally told me the story as I was getting off the phone interview with him. He played at the folk festival, and I you know, my face hurt from laughing so much from Mel Tillis. And I came along in the late 70s, and I was in love. Sorry, Amy. I was in love with Susan Anton. Now, I don't know if y'all remember Susan Anton or not. She was this tall, leggy, blonde. She was hot. I had very bad thoughts about Susan Anton. I'm sorry, Mrs. Anton. So Susan Anton, and to Mel Tillis, as he says in passing, before we get off the phone, says, well, at least you are Susan Anton. And I said, wait a minute. Let's pump the brakes. So I pumped the brakes a little bit. So I said, now you and Susan had a replacement show one summer together. Yes, we sure did. And it said, did you not like her? Oh, she was wonderful. She was great. And said, did she not show up for work on time? No, I love it. Did she drink a lot? No, she was wonderful. I love her very much. I said, well, what was your problem with her? She had gas. I said, I will not do the male tell us, I know you just hate. He said, before she got on stage to sing, she would get nervous, and she would toot. I said, she about killed me. I said, when that show was canceled, I was so happy. All of my illusions about Susan Anton went out the window. I was no longer in love with Susan Anton. That'll do it every time. So, how am I doing? I have one more story. Is that it? Just one more, then all of them. You may have heard this story, but this is the most famous story that I have. When in the late 80s, when I was at the Democrat, I was still in my 20s, I was invited to St. George Island to interview the British actor John Hurt. Now, you know John Hurt through The Elephant Man. I'm not an animal, I'm just a... John Hurt is one of the best actors. He played Profumo in Scandal, which is a great movie. You should see Profumo. I saw him, I got turned on to John Hurt when I saw The Shout, which is based on Robert Graves' novella. So anyway, I know a lot about John Hurt. He was in Midnight Express. I still do know, tell us. He was in Midnight Express. He played the old junkie, and so he told me this. He was very British. He's as British as a bee. And so I go down with my good friend, Phil Cole. Now, Phil Cole is from LA, which means Lower Alabama. And he talks like this. And Phil is as country as it comes. Now, he's a great photographer. He's smart as as it gets. But he is so country. And one time he and I had a light. I wrote down some, he speaks like he's from the country. Here's Philisms that I wrote down. Some of them are, she's got enough for 10 rows of tea. And she's as nervous as a whore in church. They call her a radio station because anyone can pick up, especially at night. You get the gist. So, Phil is a big guy. He's a big dude, too. That doesn't hurt. John Hurt is a little guy. So we go down, he's making a movie with the BBC on St. George Island. We have to wait around. Movie sets are notoriously boring. So we wait around all morning for John Hurt to take a break for lunch. Now for lunch, he goes to his trailer, which his trailer is a trailer. It's a Winnebago camper. So John Hurt, who recently died, but he smoked all the time, and he smoked Jatans. And so he said, Mr. Hurt, we'll see you now. Said, but you'll have to, come to him in his trailer. So he is sitting at the table, which is small. It's a small table, about this big. And and I am sitting here, right here. Phil, on the other hand, gets in the driver's seat, turns it around, and turns his camera on John Hurt. And so while I'm talking, he's taking pictures of John Hurt. It works fine. You've seen, you've seen pictures of. So John Hurt is chain smoking. And we talk about everything. We talk about 1984. He played Winston in 1984, which is based on the George Orwell novel. A great movie, wonderful movie. I said, weren't you scared wearing a rat cage? Because at one point they tortured him, and they put him down, put him in the dungeon with rats. Rat said, so I was not scared of the little beast, said, but Burton was. So Richard Burton was petrified of mice. He said, I didn't mind them at all. But they were flashbacks. Said, they were right in your face. They would right in your face. Going back to Susan Anton for a minute. So it's like having a bunch of Susan Antons on your head. And we talk about everything. We talk about the BBC. We have an hour-long conversation. John Hurt couldn't be nicer. He's just sitting the whole time. He's smoking Jatans, and Phil is shooting away. And I'm talking. I'm saying, this one's going down for the record, folks. This is one of the best interviews I've ever done. So finally it ends up, and you make small talk at the end. And I said, Mr. Hurt, I said, anything, this is in 1988 or 89. It says, St. George Island, said, oh, said, it's absolutely beautiful, said, it's wonderful, said, this is one of the most wonderful places I've ever been, said, except for these damn mosquitoes. To which Phil, who has not said anything for an hour, Phil is right this far from me, and he goes, you need skin so soft. Now, this is in the day before Skin So Soft was sold as a bug repellent and all that. And John Hurt takes a drag and says, excuse me? And Phil, as if he's talking to somebody who just learned to speak English, says, you need skin so soft. To which John Hurt is flabbergasted at this point. And he turns to his assistant and he says to his assistant, oh, said, we must buy some of that. To which Phil is right here. I'm just sitting here and said, Phil goes, you can't buy it. And I step in and I'm like, Mr. Hurt, is a lady's lotion. It's supposed to keep bugs off you. You have to wait until the guy passes by your house and you whip. So I'm speaking English. I'm translating English for an English person. Now, the story doesn't end. I come back to the paper. I tell that story to R.C. Morganwell. You all remember R.C. R.C. thinks this is the funniest thing he's ever heard. You need skits. Oh, John. He's from Memphis. So anyway, R.C. Moves to San Francisco, is an opera singer. So anyway, he is in San Francisco, California. He looks across the street. San Francisco Film Festival is going on. This is the year that Contact came out with Jodie Foster and John Hurt. John Hurt played the billionaire who was floating around in space. And R.C., who's a tall dude, who's, you know when R.C.'s in the room, and he's not quiet. And R.C. sees John Hurt and goes, ooh, John Hurt. risks his life to walk across the North Beach traffic. And goes, stands right in front of John Hurt and goes, you need skin so soft.
Nice.
And on that, do you have any questions? I'll be glad to entertain. Except if your last name is Fuquay. Uh-oh.
Yes, of all your interviews, I enjoyed it, but you left one out. Warren Zevon.
Oh, Warren Zevon.
Apparently you had a great interview with him.
Okay, Warren Zevon. Thank you, Mr. Fuquay. Matt Fuquay, his nephew, is my roommate from the University of Florida that knows where the bodies are buried. That's why everything I have said is true, right? Warren Zevon, I am in love with Warren Zevon. He's playing at the Moon. I do this interview with Warren Zevon for an hour. It is the most glowing interview I've ever, one of the most glowing interviews I've ever done. I write the cover story for Limelight. It is a Valentine to Mr. Zevon. I'm sorry, I won't apologize for it. I don't care. Warren Zevon's great. One of the most underrated American songwriters out there. And so I sent several over to Carswell, and I said, my esteemed lawyer and roommate, he was the best man at my wedding, we met. Mr. Fuquay and I went to the concert and said, we'd love to meet Warren Zevon. It was my birthday? Was it my birthday? Yeah, it was my birthday. Sometime between when we left our house, Amy was driving, by the way, I was overserved. I was feeling no pain by the time we came to meet Mr. Zevon. So we go to the stage door. Matt, my attorney, has in the meantime bought a Warren Zevon t-shirt. It is black. It has a smoking skull and crossbones on it. He has tied it to his head, as you do. So I go to Warren Zevon's manager and I said, hi, Scott said I can meet Mr. Zevon. Said, I'm here with my roommate. We've been fans for a long time, and we just like to say hello and thank you for all the great songs. And his manager looks at me and looks up and down and says, Will, are you that guy who wrote the story? I said, yeah, you know, that guy. He said, oh, he don't want to see you. And I said, and Matt goes, hey, come on. I said, that was a really good story. He said, so why not? I said, I played golf with him, Mr. Zevon, all day today. And all he could talk about was that story. How much he, you know, that stupid story. And so Matt, Mr. Fugate, starts up with a guy. Because he's a lawyer. And so he starts lawyering his ass. And to which I say, and after I listen to it long enough, to which I say, which ass cheek did I not kiss enough? Click. The door was shut. I never got to meet Warren Zevon. Matt never got to meet Warren Zevon. We were driven back to my house. We sat in the backyard going, we didn't get Warren Zevon. Why did Warren Zevon like us? I don't know. So the next morning, I go to my cohort, Steve Queen, at the newspaper. I tell him what has happened. And he goes, well, that little and he goes to Vinyl Fever, sells all his albums by Warren Zevon, and writes a bad song about it. And that is my proudest moment, is hearing the song, Warren Zevon is an asshole. So, so there's Warren Zevon.
Let's give Mark one more big round of applause.